really great to have you all come out. My name is Jack Tchen. I'm the director of the VA Institute here at NYU. I think we're all here because we're at the beginning of the countdown for the Shimabukuro concert tomorrow night, and I really can't wait. I was just listening to him earlier at home. And part of that process is the premiere, the New York premiere of Tadashi Nakamura's documentary. And we're really happy to have Ted here. Where are you, Ted? You just stand up? Oh. Okay, please welcome Ted. So that countdown begins tonight. First, I want to thank the co-sponsors of this evening. Hālāwai, those of you who know Hālāwai, the organization, thank you so much for bringing out your folks, and you'll get to talk to and meet Andy in a short while after the film. And also the Center for Asian American Media. Thank you for your support in making this evening possible. And also the Cantor folks here in this space. We were in a smaller space, and they were able to switch us around to this larger space, so we're a little more comfortable tonight. I just want to say something about these organizations. As you know, it's not like these organizations existed just out of nowhere. Just like APA Institute, these are really the consequence of years of people pushing, students pushing, filmmakers pushing, people from the Pacific Islands pushing for spaces in which we can begin to get together, begin to name the issues that we're dealing with, and begin to find a place in which we can find some common cause. So in some ways, this kind of film, this incredible film, and in fact, Jake's work himself, really kind of come out of this kind of process, right? So I'm really delighted that we could do this all together and be building together after all these years. I also want to say a little bit about Asian/Pacific/American studies here at NYU. The slashes are there in part because it's not about people of that blood necessarily. Asian American blood, whatever that means, Pacific Islander blood, that certainly means certain things. But the slashes are there also because it's not strictly about people and people moving across boundaries and borders and zones, but it's also about ideas. It's also about things moving across. And certainly tonight we're kind of witnessing the thing, this ukulele, right, which migrates from place to place, and it changes and morphs and develops into these kind of creative forms that we're going to be enjoying tonight. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that afterwards. So I hope you can stick around. And it's really analyzing how these things happen. So we get to enjoy this, but we also want to make that connection to what happens elsewhere in the world. So I'm hoping later on we're going to talk about maybe the banjo, how the banjo emerges in a place like New York, and what is that all about? Right? So how do we understand all that and the connections between people? So I'm going to be introducing both Jake and Andy when they come up. Wow. The first time I've seen this film, and I am impressed. So welcome and thank you both for being here. We wanted to have a little discussion and open it up to the audience. I'm sure you've got a lot of questions and things you want to say. Now, Ted, I've known you for a while, and I've kind of been watching your films, for a while, and I am blown away. This is on a whole other scale. It's a whole other universe. The photography was beautiful, and the way you constructed the story was amazing. So there's so many ways in which this really works so beautifully. So I really have to say just congratulations. Really.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let me just say one thing. I really feel like I want to watch this film a few more times and maybe start thinking about it. But part of what strikes me about the film is that, of course, we open with Jake's music, and we begin to appreciate the sheer artistry of the music, and we follow his story, right? With his mom we see her pregnant, and then, of course, Kaz, the manager as well. You know? So there are these three women in his life. So there's this beautiful kind of lyrical kind of music, and then the storyline is quite beautiful as well, and we see a range of ages from very young to the seniors, which is very moving. And it struck me that the way you cut it and the way you shot it, because you did most of the, you did a lot of the cinematography, if I recall.
Well, yeah, I was, we actually had two great photographers, Jim Choi from San Francisco and Anthony from Hawaii. So I was the beat camera, so I was,
Well,
and
so you were directing.
Yeah.
You're directing, and a lot of those angles, you know, of course, the sneakers hanging from the New York, you know, lines, you know. So you captured so much of the poetry that seemed to go along with the music beautifully. So can you tell us a little bit about the making of the film, but maybe start with how you came up with this idea at the beginning? Yeah. What was that?
Well, first off, thank you everyone for coming tonight. Really appreciate it. Thanks to Mita and NYU for hosting us. She's actually inquired about the film way before it was even finished, so it's been a big supporter of the film. But actually, to answer your question, this was actually the first film that I was kind of technically hired to direct. So Donald Young is actually, it's kind of his brainchild. He's the producer from the Center for Asian American Media. And I was actually all set to go to graduate school. And he gave me a call and was saying, you know, I've heard of this guy, Jake. We have funding for it, and we'd like you to direct it. So, for a director, to not have to fundraise is huge. And so funds were already secured. He had already agreed with Jake. So it was really, you know, an ideal project for me to step into. The only hard part was that, you know, I really was coming from a blank slate. Like a lot of people, you know Jake's name, you know, probably is a name you read, but you don't say out loud, you know that Jake. Or maybe I saw the YouTube clip, but I really didn't know too much about him. And you know, honestly, I'm not I didn't know too much about the history of the ukulele. It's not like I was, you know, bumping his albums in my car. So I think for me, I had to do a lot of research, but I think it was good on one hand because I was able to get to know him within 2.5 years. And the goal for this film was to express the person that I got to know within an hour. And it was a crazy couple years because, you know, he had, when I first met him, he had just gotten engaged. And now he's a proud father of a 10-week-old baby boy. And of course, things like the tsunami happened in between. And so, you know, it was really a big challenge for me, but I think I had such a great producer in Don Young and had great people around me that, and of course, you know, Jake is, what you see is what you get. I think most people, maybe when they see him on stage, he's almost too nice. And for me, I'm sure from New York, or coming from LA, someone who's too nice, you're kind of like, wait a minute, you know, what's going on? What's your angle? And that's kind of how I felt. I was like, oh, come on, man. Like, you know. But he's really that sincere. You know, an example is that the opening concert that we shot, his concert was 2 hours, but he sat and signed autographs for 2.5 hours. I mean, like the venue, you know, cleanup crew were like, I'm going home, this guy's crazy. So, you know, if it wasn't, you know, because he could be a real jerk, right, a real douche, so luckily he was real down to earth, and it made everything easy for me.
Well, you're being very modest also. May I? So you
The
could,
JA things.
you know, maybe tell us a little bit about how this story began coming together in your mind, because I think it's deceptively smooth and flowing, almost like the music, and the way you edited and constructed the story. And anybody who's done this kind of work knows that it's not like that, right? So can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Yeah, you know, initially, I think most people, if they know Jake, they know him to a certain point. I think just because he's been such a high profile for a little while, that he's kind of media trained, so he has a spiel because he's used to maybe at most having a 20-minute segment, but usually it's 5-minute segment on NPR. So it's these sound bites, and for me, I think he wasn't used to us sticking around so long. He thought we were going to do 2 shoots and it'll be a wrap. It was years, and I kept on like hanging out with him. Like, these guys aren't going home. So,
how many hours did you shoot?
I don't know how many hours, but in terms of for like the techie nerds, we had 9 terabytes of footage, which was the hours became it didn't matter after a certain point. But for me, I think I wanted to know. You see the person, his skills speak for himself, but especially as an Asian American artist, I think I want to know where did he come from, and especially when people always refer to him as a virtuoso, I thought it was really cool that what does a modern day virtuoso look like, but not only that, what is a virtuoso, this local boy from Hawaii, someone who wore cross colors in high school like I did, someone who his grandma loves to go to Vegas, just as much as the next. So it was really, to me, a virtuoso is kind of this really high elitist artist, and Jake's the opposite of that. So kind of really, that's why I wanted to bring also too the women in his life in the film, because it's not like he's this genius that just happens on his own. You could show how much of influence his mom was, and for me that was, I was able to relate to him on the personal side. I know nothing about classical music or even the ukulele or Hawaiian music, but I do know what it's like to be 4th generation Japanese American. He's actually 5th generation Japanese American, and to deal with things like pressure, like feeling guilty for your success, kind of things that aren't specific to Asian Americans, but I think definitely a lot of Asian Americans can relate to that.
Well, Ted, you also come from an amazing family, both sides of your family, both your mom's side and your dad's side. And I think part of what came through is this amazing relationship between a son and a mom, and how that set a kind of pattern for his other relationships. So that kind of loving quality clearly came through, and that seems to be part of what you're connecting.
Yeah, I was able to project a lot of things through this film, but one, is definitely being, having the privilege of being from a supportive family. You do feel this responsibility, and the fact that Jake, I thought it was really interesting that families, his top priority, his first love is this instrument, and he told me that it's the instrument that actually takes him away from his family, right? And so I felt that, in a way I could relate, but I thought that was a really interesting conflict. But at the same time, the more he tours, the more his family's proud of him. And so, he's kind of caught in the middle. But also too, I think, having met, I'm very much dependent on the women in my life too. And, you can see through Kaz and now Kelly, he's basically, he's dependent on women his whole life. And, if it wasn't for the youth and the women in his life, I think he'd be kind of a lost puppy in this big world.
Well, Andy, let's bring you into this conversation. We're lucky tonight because we really have 2 very accomplished artisans and artists. Certainly Tad, in terms of, even at this very young age, being really quite a spectacular filmmaker and kind of being able to envision and pull it all together and make it happen. And Andy, I know we've never met before, but it's really, I'm really delighted. And
my pleasure.
Yeah, and you yourself are an accomplished slaki guitar musician. Among other things, I hear you do some stuff with money on the side, as part of your, it seems to be a, kind of a little hobby, I guess. But also part of the tension that we're kind of picking up in terms of thematics of the film is, of course, being in Hawaii and not being there, right? And having Hawaii in your heart and your relationships in your heart. So then also pushing this instrument to all of its limits, to the point that it's not even Hawaiian sounding anymore. It's not a part of what you grew up with. And you could see that ambivalence in the way he talked about the instrument and how then he came back to it in some ways. So I don't know, I mean, as a musician, as someone who's in New York, could you talk a little bit about that as well?
Sure. Yeah, as you said, we didn't meet before tonight, and this is very much a from the seat of your pants type of situation, because I didn't know what the format was going to be. I wasn't sure. I was sitting here quietly, not sure if I should be preparing a question for Tad or what was going to happen.
It's spontaneous, right?
It is spontaneous, and I think musically often that is embraced and celebrated, especially in Hawaiian music, where it borrows so much from blues and jazz and improvisation. So musicians, a lot of the time, as long as you're not from highly trained classical, which tends to be more rigid, when you're uncomfortable and trying to figure out your way right there at that moment, I mean, that's excitement. So yeah, I think that the film was wonderful. I was curious how much of the themes are sort of preconceived, especially since you hadn't met Jake previously and hadn't followed his career closely. So it was really the research going in beforehand. How much of those themes are you lining up as you're filming, and then how much of it comes and evolves and comes out later? I mean, some of the things that you mentioned, being away from home, that's a reality for all touring musicians. I mean, I'm fortunate, I think, not to be one of them, because to be in a different city every night, being away from home and family, successful musicians who are on the road, they tell me that they really made a sacrifice. Many of them did not have families along the way. They either got married much later on because it was too difficult while they were touring. Others had families, but ran into difficulty maintaining those relationships, because it's very difficult to have maintain those close relationships when you're away for so long. So those are realities. But people from Hawaii, I think, perhaps even more so, because all the people that I know, or it's very common, maybe I should say, growing up on an island, which I did not. My wife was born and raised in Honolulu. But it's so common to have island fever, right? You're on a rock, and you're really wondering what's outside of there. But so many of them leave, go to school, have careers, and many come back home, and others do not. And because of the culture, because Hawaii is such a special place for so many of us, I think that theme is even magnified. Because being in New York, being a board member of Hālāwai, part of our mission is really to keep the community together. Because for those who were born and raised in Hawaii and come to New York, being 5,000 miles away from home, it's not just the distance. There are cultural differences, weather. This room is kind of cold.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm nervous or cold, but
Oh, it's cold.
Well, as a musician, right? So you play Hawaiian classical guitar, and can you tell us a little bit about what it means to play in that tradition? And I don't know if you've, in other parts of your playing, have ventured in the same way that Jake has ventured. I imagine you probably have at different points in your life played the guitar, either the slap-key guitar in a different way, or pushed it, or some other instrument. So maybe kind of talk a little bit about that process to give us kind of additional insights about what he was doing as he was getting older and older. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's a subject that can be spoken about all day, because in addition to being in financial services and as an avocation playing music when I can, I also am administrator of a website of Hawaiian music community, and that is an ongoing debate constantly, and not just in music, but in hula as well. Because when you have a tradition, there is this tension. There are traditionalists who want it played the old way, and they don't want it to change. And then there are others who feel that they honor the tradition, but they really want to, push the boundaries a little bit, because as an art form, you are trying to discover your own path and make it your own. And if you're playing Hawaiian slack key, if you understand what the foundation is, and if you had teachers who taught you the tradition, you honor that, but you're still trying to see where you can take it. And I saw that in your film with Jake when he was talking about adding distortion and having effects pedals and doing those kinds of things. But I find it admirable that he came back, and even though he wants to explore, he wants to be innovative, at the end of the day, he sort of circled back and said he wants to continue doing that, but he still wants to maintain the unique sound of the ukulele and not lose that. And I see that in Hawaiian slide guitar, you see that in hula dancing. I think it's a very common theme.
Okay. I'm going to want us to talk a little bit about maybe some of the history of the book itself, and how it's moved across spaces, right? Because that's, I think, a key thematic, to talk about it as a traditional instrument. Yeah, absolutely. There's a clearly amazing, well worked out tradition, but at the same time, it's always been in movement, right? So I'm hoping we get to that. Maybe once we kind of get you all involved a little bit, we can kind of get to that. One of the other things that really struck me, and both of you may have some thoughts about this, is incredible footage of Sendai. Of course, we were all following it in the newspapers. Some of you probably maybe even have family and friends who were going through it. But I think it's especially poignant now, having New York having really a very mild. I'm not trying to minimize what's happened here whatsoever, because a lot of people have been really going through very tough times. But in comparison, right? Much less, And I think, part of that distance you're talking about between New York and Hawaii, it's not just the 5,000 miles, but in New York, we have, we of course think we're at the center of the world, which people in LA kind of think that too, right? You got it, right? But
It was better basketball.
We'll wait for those Brooklyn.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But it's, Sendai, and so far away. To watch that footage, all of a sudden, I think as a New Yorker, to kind of connect up with that in some way that maybe I hadn't before. And also with New Orleans as well. Those of you who are from New Orleans can appreciate how more devastating even New Orleans was than what happened in New York. But can you talk a little bit about those emotions? I mean, you're going there with Kaz and Jake to Sendai. And growing up in LA, you've had some earthquakes and tremors and all that. I mean, so there's this other kind of wild card factor in all of this that's part of the backdrop of the story as well. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think with what we didn't want to do, I think I knew what I didn't want to do versus what I want to do. Shooting is, we didn't want to do, Wycliffe goes to Haiti kind of thing, and use it as, and Jake was very conscious of it too, because he almost really didn't want to get as less publicity on those events, because he was very conscious that it could look like a media stunt. And even for me, it's kind of one of those things of, because I'm all about real material things and like really what's progress, what's help, and so, to think, I learned a lot, because even for me, I was like, we're gonna go and who's gonna play, and then we leave, but what can that do? And I was actually very impressed by how much, like you're living through hell, and you can tell with the kids. I think the kids are young enough where they're really into it, but it was the parents that knew that, once, at least they can give their kids 2 hours of smiles. And that was worth it. That meant a whole lot to them, which, I was very cynical about probably before until I actually saw. And I think, hopefully you guys can see for yourselves tomorrow when Jake comes into town. As much as I try, the film doesn't do him justice in terms of, really what his music can resonate. And I was, really impressed with, again, because I think an advantage is that it's all instrumental, therefore language isn't a barrier, right? So there's no translation, so it's pure emotion. And I think the people in Sendai, they really appreciated it. And I think that just kind of, again, I didn't know what to expect, but really felt that, I felt that Jake does have this gift, and then he's not selfish with it. He's not exploiting it. He's not doing it for fame, but he really wants to. This guy is he really loves this instrument and believes in that instrument, and he really does want to share that with as many people. And luckily, I think he has the power to showcase that and express it to both young and old. And I think his biggest talent is actually to be able to show up to a venue, read the room, and play according to what the audience and what the vibe is. Because he usually doesn't have a set list, and so it's not kind of like I'm going to do my thing and you take it or leave it, but he really wants to make it appropriate, and he really wants to communicate, which I think any artist, that's what the goal is to communicate with an audience or just with an individual.
We're going to want to open this up, and I know Anita's going to be with Mike, so but let me just kind of ask you a quick follow-up question about that. I don't know if Andy, you wanted to say anything at all about this, but he makes a point, and we hear it oftentimes that music is healing. Do you think filmmaking has a potential quality for that as well? I don't know if you've thought about that when you're making a list of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I definitely think that art itself is healing. But I think, for example, I think any artist is able to just project a lot of their own, what they're going through in their life. So for me, an example, my grandmother passed away during the making of this, and so that last scene, that was one of the few times that I identified with anyone in Japan, was going to the senior home, and those faces look familiar to me, right? Whereas I don't speak Japanese, and so that was another interesting part. Both Jake's 5th generation Japanese American, I'm 4th generation, and so on one hand, we're very, very disconnected to Japan, but once the tsunami hit and once we were there, all of a sudden it became a lot closer relationship. But to answer your question, as a maker, I don't know if I feel like I can heal anything, but definitely a beneficiary of other people's music, film. So maybe in that sense, I do think it has potential, but I think definitely nothing's going to happen. I think you can inspire. That's my goal. I think that's Jake's goal, is that a song won't do anything, a film won't do anything, but hopefully it'll inspire people to actually do the work to make a difference and make some actual concrete change.
Yeah, I think that the two are tied together, because I very much agree with the comment that music really brings people together, because it's something that we all feel. It does transcend languages and cultures, because if you're playing a song, or musicians who are in the United States, they can go to Europe, they can go to Asia, they can go to emerging countries, and musicians sort of speak a language with one another, and it can be completely different styles of music. And when they play to an audience, it's about, as Tad said, trying to connect with the audience. And songs often tell stories, and people can relate to those stories. And that's where I feel that there is a relationship with film, because there's a story being told. There is a narrative there. So the audience can relate to the characters or the individuals in the documentary and some of the things that they're going through. And man, that one shot of the the mountain of debris, that was just impactful. So yeah, I think that maybe it's the art, maybe it doesn't matter if it's music, if it's a painting, if it's a film. it does touch us in different ways.
Great, let's open this up and see what you have for comments or questions. If you could just keep it brief so we get more people to say something.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I sort of have a comment and a question. It's kind of musical. Hope I can tighten it up. It was very obvious when you said one of his true talents was being able to reach the people in the room. And one of the most moving parts for me was when he was playing in the nursing home. Now, he clearly was, I don't know if it was improvisational or he had some chords in mind and he was taking the timbre and the feeling from the audience. I don't know, but he clearly reached them, and which is astonishing over the generations and the cultural upbringing and background. But my question is, this is just a musical question, he brought them to another place, it seemed to me, that he took them out of that room and out of that somewhat dreary, I mean, I'm sure they're beautifully cared for and everything, but they're older, they're more feeble, they're not who they used to be. He was able to take them musically to another place. And I was just curious if you knew where that place was, if it was something from their youth, something individual for each of them, something common to them, again, because of the timbre and the type of music. And it was, to my way of thinking, different music than what he'd been playing all the way through. And was there anything specific to that generation that resonated, that music resonated to them, or was it something you think that was just so peaceful that he was picking up?
No, I think, he, for that particular scene, that was his original piece that he had wrote, but in preparation, he did play some traditional folk Japanese songs, just so to interact, he's not going to go up there and play Bohemian Rhapsody, right?
No, I knew that, but I mean, I'm sure they never heard what he was playing either
Right,
at
right.
this point, and yet something about
Yeah.
composition reached them.
Yeah, no, and I think, and I do, it was pretty amazing to be in that room and to just look at the faces. Because again, I think that they're just obvious. There was no need for explanation for certain people. Same thing with Kaz when she was going through Sendai. I mean, there was no need to be like, so how are you feeling? I think there was, which is, I think, it's very subtle, right? But it's very, probably more sophisticated than when, I think that's one of the other things as I was tracking his career doing, like in the beginning, he just wanted to rip, he just wanted to shred. And actually that was probably my, to answer your question, going in, initially I was like, in my head I was like, this guy's the best in the world. Like he's like the LeBron, I probably have a bigger ego than he does, but I was like, you can go around the world and you could battle anyone, you just kill him, and like, I think he was, yeah, and I do think that he looks young, but he is very mature as an artist and as a performer when it comes to that, and actually like just toning it down and it making it not about him, but really about the music.
Yeah, you could feel there. I mean, even if it's a song that he composed and they had never heard it before, but he was also playing it a certain kind of way and was connecting, and you could feel that kind of connection happening on the film. But I'm sure it must have been even more powerful in the room. So,
Yeah.
Is that there?
Hi, guys. Tadashi, you sort of filled in something for me, and I'll fill in something for you. I live in the village, and I live in Honolulu. And I was back in the Hālāwai shopping center about 15 years ago. I had this ukulele player. And so I walked down to the edge, and I don't know if you've been in the Hālāwai shopping center, but there are various levels.
Yeah.
And I'm looking down at the first level, and there's this kid playing a ukulele. The only people around were people looking over the edge. And I'm saying to myself, this kid is great. He might be 18 years old. So when he took a break, I walked down to him and I said, hey kid, he says, if you put a bucket up, you'll collect a lot of money. And he says, oh, I can't, because this is a paid gig. And the point of it is, there's really not a lot of business in Hawaii. And that's what he was doing. He was playing these kinds of gigs. never knew what put him over the edge because I followed his career best I could. And he was always local until 7, 8 years ago, I guess, when he burst into the scene. So, thank you very much because you did put that together.
Yeah, it also says something about how things have changed with technology. Also, YouTube and hitting it big on YouTube, if you're lucky enough, if it just so happens, kind of it's changed a little bit. Somebody looking very front here? Point your way to the mic.
So thank you for a beautiful film. I've seen Jake 3 times. I think you did convey his personality, and I think you did do it justice. And what I've noticed is he makes any room the intimate room. When I saw him at Lincoln Center, it was like I instantly knew him. I saw him at Housing Works. When I saw him at Brooklyn Bowl, I was at that concert. Something about the intimacy of him, of how welcome he makes you feel as an audience member. So I think you did do it justice.
Thank you.
And second thing is, what type of cameras did you use as a camera person? Because the images were beautiful, and the sound was beautiful as well. And the third question is, I've had this moment, either be camera, which you're doing, or just watching. Was there a moment where you were kind of overcome, where the hair stood up on the back of your neck, and you just, there's so many great moments in this film, real moments that are not created by the editing, but created by the power of his music. I'm wondering, just on a personal level, was there a moment, whether it was in Sendai or at Brooklyn Bowl, where you were just affected so much by that one moment?
Yeah, no, to answer your questions, we initially shot on a Sony EX1 camera, which is just, they call it a prosumer camera, HD camera. But also, towards the end, we started shooting on the Canon digital SLRs. So we shot on a Canon 7D and a 5D. Yeah, the sound, well, you know, I think, again, I mentioned the DPs, and then we had really great sound guy, Adriano Bravo, who's actually from New York. He lives in San Francisco. And actually, one of my favorite outcomes of the film was getting to work with Paluku Documentary Films in Hawaii. So once we got to meet them, they took care of us whenever we were on the island. And they're all Native Hawaiian filmmaking production house, and they actually run their own on-demand cable channel that do all news and films in Native Hawaiian language. And so they really took care of us. Because again, you know, I'm from LA, the producer's from San Francisco. It was the Center for Asian American Media Film from San Francisco. So we were we were outsiders coming into a very, specific community, but also too, very specific native land. And having to be able to work with Hawaiians in Hawaii gave us a lot more access. And, I was able to trust them with everything. But also, you have to answer your second question. I think I talked about Sendai having that moment, but the first scene of Jake in the elementary school in the beginning, that was actually the first time. That was our first shoot, and that was actually the first time I had seen or heard Jake live. And I think it all changed from there, right? I think that you see him on YouTube, but then again, if anyone knows, I mean, like a room full of elementary school kids, that's going to be our toughest audience, So and he knew how to make them cheer, he knew how to make them quiet, he knew how to make them clap, and then the next week he's at a symphony hall selling out $200 seat venues, but I think going back, if you wanted to go back to the issue of the history of the uke, I did come in with different intentions in that, I think my background is more from, Asian American studies, more of an identity-based political background. And so I came in with all these preconceived notions of, it's a Japanese American taking this, local Hawaiian instrument worldwide, and what are the politics in that? You know, and I was really looking into issues of appropriation, especially coming from Hawaii, you know, where culture has been so exploited, and their culture is constantly being appropriated and profited by non-Hawaiians. So I had all these kind of preconceived notions, and then again, that first elementary school performance, you realize, at least for me, it all went out the window, because you realize he's not selling aloha. He's not claiming to, you know, carry on any ancient tradition. He's really doing something it's very Asian American, right? He's playing jazz, he's playing stuff he grew up on, and so to me it became instantly a non-issue, because to me he wasn't claiming to be playing traditional Hawaiian music, and it was just something very different. So yeah, I think that first performance, I think really everything changed from there.
Where was that school?
Madera Elementary School in Bay Area.
Okay, thank you.
I know I never had an assembly like that.
Oh.
Kids are lucky.
Yeah, very lucky.
Yeah, I think the traditionalists almost have the opposite problem, because if they go to Jake's show, they go in hopes that he'll play some Hawaiian, and chances are he won't play any. So they're demanding that he play because they know that he's capable.
Well, can we talk a little bit about the instrument itself, you know, about some of that history? Because I think that's definitely one of the narratives that is very real in terms of appropriation and tourism and all that kind of stuff. And certainly there was the hula circuits, you know, in New York and LA, and some of our graduate students have been writing books about that kind of work. But at the same time, you know, the instrument itself is a more complicated migration story. I don't know if you share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating story. In fact, a pretty young one, really, because the ukulele is probably 130 years old, I think. You know, at least in the Hawaiian form, yeah, because the ukulele came from the Portuguese, came from the island of Madeira, where 3 furniture makers came over to Hawaii in 1897. And Madeira actually means wood in Portuguese, because there are so many woodworkers there, well known for their furniture and curios and tables. So 3 guys came to Hawaii, and in the 1880s they began building instruments, which for them back home was known as the machete. The machete was really the ukulele, and in Madeira that was their national instrument and had been loved and popular for hundreds of years. But like so many things that are imported into Hawaii, you know, the Hawaiians made it their own. I think that Hawaii has a rich history of really blending all the things that came, whether it's Pidgin English, you know, blending the languages, the foods, blending all the cultural foods.
Song as
The
well.
ukulele got a makeover in Hawaii because the builders started constructing with local Hawaiian koa wood, beautiful wood that is not found anywhere else outside of Hawaii. And you know, beautiful flamed wood, it sounds great. A new repertoire, new tuning, and it changed. And then on top of that, when you talk about sort of a PR push, I mean, really that's what happened, because you know, I think 1893 to 1915, there were troops of Hawaiian entertainers that played at World's Fairs, played at theaters all over the mainland. You know, really with the backing and encouragement of what predated the Hawaii Tourism Bureau today. So those entertainers made a name for themselves, but also really promoted the island of Hawaii, the music, the culture, probably culminating in 1915 when there was a I don't remember what it was, there was an exposition in San Francisco where 17 million people came. Yeah, 17 million people came, and you know, Hawaiian music has never been as popular since as right before the Great Depression. I mean, the ukulele manufacturers in Hawaii were doing well. mainland manufacturers were making ukuleles. I mean, it became very common to play the ukulele.
Okay, well, terrific. I mean, that helps us frame something about how these things move from place to place and through port cultures and through island cultures. Things are kind of mixing, and that was also happening in New York. I mean, I think we tend to disassociate ourselves from an island like Hawaii to the island in Manhattan. But just to put in a quick comment, the banjo itself from Africa being transformed in the streets of New York and Long Island also then becomes something that is different and changes and is actually incorporated in a different way. In the case of minstrelsy, blackface minstrelsy, but it really is an African instrument that then has a richer history about how it's really becomes also part of African American and part of kind of a white culture, musical culture. And there is that kind of comparability, and I'm hoping we'll be able to follow up on that in future programs. But there's, okay, we have one more chance for one more comment. Yes, maybe this woman.
Hi, I've been coming to a lot of events that are Hawaiian mostly, and when I first saw Jake's name in the scene, I was like, who is this young man? He's not playing Hawaiian on the ukulele. I don't want to see him. So it was kind of like this resistance to want to really get to know him. This movie absolutely gave me so much more about his background and made me understand him better. But I have a very simple question. Watching him when he's ripping that ukulele, I'm thinking, is his hands aching and hurting? Is he in pain that night? It's just interesting to me that, how does that feel to him?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, maybe you both have some insight with it.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, that's just another thing that he, something, because he's very humble. He'll say he doesn't play any other instruments, but, he was in the drum line in high school. And that's actually how he got his strum, because instead of having to use his shoulder muscles, it's all in the wrist, just to hold that, to hold that snare drum. And he just applied that to his strum. But so again, he'll nitpick things. He likes to end his songs like kind of to hold that key, and he picked that up from piano players. That they play that last key and they almost pull the note, and then almost that's these little things. I mean, he'll just dissect, and he's very. I mean, he's a scientist when it comes to his craft, and so I think, even for me, I'm still, even the fact that, for example, I didn't realize all of the songs he covers, he arranges, because I'm not a musician, so I just, he didn't write it, it's a cover song, but I didn't realize that he actually has to musically arrange something, especially like Bohemian Rhapsody, where you're talking about a band, you're talking about members of the band, multiple instruments, and again, you're dealing with 4 strings, and he has to try to arrange it and kind of translate that. So I learned a lot about music, and also too, I mean, his fingers he has like calluses on his hands like all the time.
Andy, painful?
I don't think what he's doing is painful. I mean, like Tad said, it was his drum, training, and he keeps his hand very loose, so he can strum very quickly. But on the other hand, you see that he's sweating up there. I mean, it's very physical. I mean, from his time, being young in pure heart, he was already a very dynamic person on stage, and a very, he's not just standing still and playing. There are times when he's sitting there, but other times he's dancing, full effort. And I don't know, I think for me, I would just mention that, people love the ukulele. It has such a broad appeal. And you often hear, why is that? It's small, it's portable. That's true. I've heard Jake perform, and he talks about the ukulele just makes people happy. And I think that's true. sometimes people say that the ukulele is easy to play. I don't think that's necessarily true. And I know that there are a lot of ukulele players out there tonight. So I just wanted to say that John King, the late John King, who was an accomplished ukulele performer in his own right, but he was also a historian of the instrument. And he said, for those that say that the ukulele is easy to play, don't believe them. It's easy to play poorly, but it's difficult to play well. And he went as far as to say that there's a thing called CUPS, crummy ukulele player syndrome, which is very common, and those who suffer from it usually do not know that they suffer from it. So when you see Jake play and what Tad captured in his performances and throughout the story, I mean, who can play like that? Very few people. But the amazing thing is that he's inspiring a whole generation of young players who are playing in that style that is really unique to him.
Well, we need to give a round of thank yous now. The incredible staff of the UK Institute, Nita and Yanni, who organized this whole event. Folks is maybe outside now, and other APA Institute staff. So, and tomorrow, how many of you are going to be going to that? Oh, you didn't know about it? Oh, tomorrow is the concert. Tomorrow is the concert. Sadly, I think
It's on the Hālāwai calendar.
sold out. Yeah, I'm really sorry. But he is playing around the region, and he's actually playing in Connecticut.
He's in Connecticut tonight.
Yeah. He's playing around. He's going to be in DC, so you can hop a train and hop the Chinatown bus and get down to DC next week.
Where is he
He's playing at Skirball tomorrow night, but my understanding is that it's sold out.
That's sold out. So you have to go down to DC. Well, you can look it up. He's playing at the Smithsonian. But in any case, I'm really delighted, those of you who are going to be going tomorrow night, to have this 1-2 combination. And those of you who are not going tomorrow night have really had the privilege of seeing this incredible film and meeting Tad. And thank you, Andy, so much for being a part of this.
Pleasure, thank you.
So,
Real quick, the film will actually be have a national broadcast on May 10th on PBS. Yeah.